This is a Main Hustle Media podcast.
Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Jackie O and you're listening to Militantly Mixed.
Yo, this is Rashani from the Single Simulcast. And when I'm not making you laugh or making up parody songs, I'm kicking back, listening to Militantly Mixed.
I would like to acknowledge that the Militantly Mixed podcast is recorded on the traditional lands of the Chumash and the Tongva people, and I wish to pay my respects to the people of those nations, both past and present. Hey y'all, welcome to Militantly Mixed, the podcast about race and identity from the mixed race perspective. I am your host, Charmaine, aka Mixed Girl Maine, the busiest mixed race, bisexual, polyamorous, atheist, comic book nerd, cat mom, podcaster in this podcasting game. This is episode 99, and we are 1 week away from episode 100. We are 1 week away from the second anniversary of Militantly Mixed launching. We have just hit 3 milestones this week, or we're about to within the next day, that I will... Some of it I've already shared on social media. Some of it I'm trying to wait until the second anniversary episode to share. But there's crazy growth. Yeah, like there's just crazy changes happening with respect to Militantly Mixed that I am so excited about and so appreciative of y'all being here. Like, I don't know. I had a lot of rest this weekend. I feel good. And I just don't even know what to say. I do have my notes to tell me what to say during the intro today, but now that I'm here and recording, I have to thank everybody, which is what predominantly next week's episode will be focusing on. But I have to thank y'all. This has been an insane journey in my life. My life is fully changed by the experience of creating Militantly Mixed and having it keep going through 2 years. Statistically, independent podcasts don't survive for very long. When I was first looking for mixed race podcasts a couple years ago, I've talked about it before, there was a handful of dead podcasts, meaning just that they had stopped at some point. And there was some journalistic podcasts about mixed folks that were more topical. They were only meant to be a mini series or a limited run. And now, if you Google mixed race podcasts, I think there's about like 12 or 13 that pop up instantly, that aren't hard to search for anymore. And I'm just so excited to be a member of that club. We all tell the stories differently. We all share the stories differently. But we have these options. We have options now that we didn't have. We did not have these options even 3 years ago. So I'm really looking forward to year 3 of Militantly Mixed and the changes, the additions, I guess, more than changes that are going to happen as we go into year 3. And I'm just so excited and enthusiastic for the future of Militantly Mixed. And it's due to all y'all. I've gotten amazing experiences. I now have a whole slew of new cousins in my life, a lot of which have stayed in my life in some way, shape, or form. And every now and then I get to meet some of y'all in person. So I don't know. It's just been really, really good. I don't want to do too much reflecting on this episode though, because that's what next week's episode is about. But I had to take a moment to do that because it's been a crazy week of hitting milestones that I don't know if I was anticipating even a year ago, let alone 2 when we started the show. But for this episode, I do have a few bits of news and announcements before we get into sharing the recording for today. As I mentioned last week, it's not really a part 2, but it's an extension of the conversation that I had with Dr. Jen Noble, who was the guest last week. We ended up kind of meandering through casual conversation. I just hadn't turned off the record button. and we kept talking. And there was a section of the conversation in which we did talk about mental health and therapy, which if you've been with me for a while, you know is a topic I'm passionate about. I do talk about my own mental health quite a bit on the show. And I want to have Militantly Mixed be a safe space in which y'all can feel like you can discuss and be open about your mental health if you would like to and be comfortable with, without shame or judgment, because that is not an area in which shame or judgment should exist. It is why I am so open about my own mental health on the show. And being that Dr. Jen Noble is a psychologist, we got into it a little bit. So what you're going to hear towards the second half of the show is going to be that snippet of a conversation, of the extended conversation that we had. It wasn't a structured conversation. It wasn't a part of the interview. It was more casual. I didn't include the whole second part of our conversation because we did meander, like I said, just sharing with you the section that we discussed a little bit, mental health and therapy. And I would like to make sure that we do have a space within the community to share and talk about mental health, because it is, how the fuck else are we going to get through life, man? You know, we need to be able to feel like we have safety in being able to discuss it. And getting a chance to speak to a mixed race psychologist for the first time in my life was a pretty big deal, even though we weren't in a therapy arrangement. It was something kind of really empowering about being able to have that conversation with someone who would get it from experience, get it versus from books, even though they're educated in the field. But specifically talking about the mixed race experience as it relates to mental health was pretty important. And going forward, I would like to actually have more episodes about this. You know, when the show first started, Javia Nicole from Black Radical Queer and I used to have these episodes called Mind on My Melanin. And we would share a segment of it on her show and a segment of it on my show. And then, you know, our lives being what they were, they just got so busy we didn't continue. We didn't get to continue on doing them for too long. But it's never far away from my mind to talk about mental health and have a space for that. So Dr. Jen Noble, you're going to hear from her again. She's definitely coming back so that we can tackle more parts of mental health while mixed. But that's what we're going to get into today. Before I do that, let me just share some of the news and the announcement things that I want to do for this episode before we get to the anniversary episode next week. Okay, first of all, I realize that everything that you try, it's always worth trying something if you think that there's good in it. But sometimes it doesn't work, and that it's okay if it doesn't work out. And sometimes I find that I will try to jam a square peg into a round hole to get something to work. And I really needed to learn the lesson. That's not always a good and effective use of time and energy and space and all kinds of stuff. So over the last month or so, I've been doing a lot of fundraising through the show, which you've heard about every episode. We have, and still do, have the Militantly Mixed and the Bell Project Legal Defense Fund, in which we are trying to raise a minimum of $2,000 for the Bell Project. The Bell Project being something that of personal interest to me. I'm really passionate about, I don't like the word Bell reform, but dismantling the Bell system. Because I think it's a very flawed system. It leaves a whole lot of space for systemic racism to impact Black and brown lives in a major and negative way. And so and it's also easy to partner with them for fundraising. That is why we initiated the Militantly Mixed Bell Project Legal Defense Fund. That is going to stay up. Hopefully we'll hit that $2,000. If we hit it and pass it, that's the goal. Honestly, it's something that I wouldn't mind just leaving open forever in case anybody is feeling like they need to do some donations. We have that space for it. So if you want to give money to the Bell Project, in the immediate future, that fundraiser is designed to help in terms of our siblings that are out there protesting, even though the news cycle isn't covering them as much. There are still protests, rallies all around the country. And there's still, police brutality and harassment that is happening in those spaces. So the Bail Project in the immediate future is for helping to bail out our protesting siblings. We don't want them stuck in jail longer than they would necessarily have to if money is the reason, if bail is the reason why they can't get out. So that is open, and that is in the show notes, and it is always going to be there probably. As long as they let me keep it open, I will continue to stretch that goal. The second way that we've been fundraising is through the Mixed and Hella Black t-shirt, which is on the Teespring website, which is also in the show notes. The net profits for that shirt goes to Black Lives Matter. I'm not taking any profit or anything from it. The other portion of the sales goes directly to Teespring because that's the production costs and the hosting costs and all that kind of stuff. But what's ever left over after they take their fees goes directly to Black Lives Matter. Those are my two main fundraising avenues that I've had over the last month or so. But then I tried to get creative to find yet another way to raise funds. And it didn't really work out. So I'm going to go ahead and pull it because I tried 2 times to force the square peg in the round hole and it didn't work. What we were going to do is a couple friends of mine were willing to donate the cost of 3 t-shirts, Mixed and Hella Black t-shirts, and 1 hoodie. And what we were going to do is we kind of stole from this idea that was going with another fundraiser in which these gamers had people donate a minimum of $5 and then you could get a package of games. In this case, it was donating $5 to be entered to win, 4 raffle tickets to be entered to win a Mixed and Hella Black t-shirt. It didn't work. The first week, I think it didn't work because I talked about it on Instagram Live once and then I struggled to kind of post about it every day. I put together a couple posts, but I didn't want to keep recycling the same information. So I just kind of didn't do a very good job of it. So I decided to talk about it on the show because that's your main avenue to militantly mix anyway, and extend it for a week. So we talked about it last week on the show. And over the course of the last week, we didn't get any donations. So I'm not going to try to extend it one more week. We tried it. It didn't work out. I haven't been able to talk to Shay about the donation of the t-shirt since. She's dealing with a family issue right now anyway. So I don't necessarily want to bother her for it right now since we didn't have any donations and it's not a priority. If she still ends up wanting to donate a t-shirt or 2 going forward, then I'll just raffle them off without fundraising necessarily. But from now, that thing's just over. That's why I'm not announcing a new winner today. That's why you didn't see it on Instagram the night before. We tried it. It didn't work out. But we still have 2 avenues to raise funds for Black Lives Matter and for the Bail Project, which I think are solid, and I'll keep leaving those avenues available for as long as they are useful. Yeah, so we talked about the raffle. We talked about the other fundraisers. We're going to get into mental health. The anniversary show is coming up next week. Now let's get into the hiatus. I've been talking about that I'm going to take some time off in July. For those of you who've been with me for a while, you're used to this. I take off a month a couple times a year for mental health. I call it my mental health hiatus. Normally I do it in April, August, and December. But this April, I did not take it because it was the start of it was few weeks after the COVID shut down, the shelter in place. So that was happening all over the world. And I felt like I needed that community aspect. I needed that connection to people. And so we stuck it out. We kept the show going during the month of April. We also started the social distancing hangouts, which has become a fixture now of the Militantly Mixed world, which we do every Sundays at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And throughout April, it was how I got through. I personally, I don't talk too much about it on the show, but COVID is actually something that terrifies the fuck out of me, like in a really big, bad way. In addition to, I don't have a lot of health issues, but I do have some physical body issues. And I also don't have health insurance. So the idea of me going out into the world right now is terrifying, and I'm not doing it unless I absolutely have to, which is pretty much just work and if I have to go to a store. But I stayed with the show during April because I needed that connection. Now that we've gone through we're not even through with the first wave, but we've gone through the initial part of the peak of the first wave and the stresses that came along with that. In addition, the civil unrest that we've been experiencing over the last month, and my need and desire to figure out ways that I could help the cause from my house since I wasn't going outside, there was a lot. It got overwhelming for many of us. I think, if not all of us, we really struggled to try to figure out how to live our lives in the time of both COVID and these current round of civil unrest and uprising. And it did hit a point a couple weeks ago where I was really struggling, really struggling. And I kind of wanted to break immediately, but I felt like I needed to push through at least through the end of June. And then when I remembered that the anniversary episode was coming up, I thought, okay, that's actually a good end, close point. I could rest after the anniversary. What's happened over the last couple of weeks is I've actually had a couple of days off. Those few days off have helped tremendously. So I feel like I'm in a lot better place today than I was even 2 weeks ago. That being said, I don't want to fool myself into thinking I've rested enough. So I am going to take the remaining 3 weeks of July off, but I'm not going to leave you high and dry. There will be something every Tuesday as per normal. I just won't be recording new episodes during that time. So I won't be doing any interviews. I won't necessarily be releasing any new footage. I may, if I have time to edit it this week before I go on hiatus. But if not, I'll do some reruns. I'll share some information that, might be something you haven't heard if you just joined us this year. That way you can hear some of your old cousins tell their stories again. So there will be at least something every Tuesday during the 3 weeks that I will be taking the break. And then we'll come back hot in August, back with new episodes and new mixed race narratives. So lastly, before we get into the second half of my conversation with Dr. Jen, I do want to share something that's going to be happening this week. So really, if you're listening to this on Tuesday, you have time to catch it, or Wednesday morning, you have time to catch this. If you're listening to it afterwards, then it'll be available on video after the fact. You may remember Allison Hart, the author of Mostly White, the mixed race narrative novel of 4 generations of mixed race women. She was on the show back in 2018, towards the end of 2018. And she's actually one of the few folks that I've actually met in real life after having her on the show. She approached me about doing a panel called Decenter, Mixed Race Artists for Black Lives, and we are going to sort of co-host a live streaming panel, which will be on YouTube. I will not have the link until right before we start the panel, so keep an eye on our social media pages so that you can get access to that link if you want to watch it live. It will also be available on YouTube after the fact. But the participants on this panel are Richard B. Pierre, who is the creator of the What Are You film. It is a short form documentary that is currently screening online through the San Francisco Black Film Festival. I'll put a link to the show notes of that so you can watch the film in advance if you'd like to. I think it's about $4, somewhere around there, for you to be able to stream the doc, but it is a documentary about mixed race folks. So he is going to be participating. You would also remember Sonia Smith King, who is director of the Multiracial Americans of Southern California. She is also the owner and creator of the Mixed Up clothing line. Both of those, there'll be links in the show notes to both of those things. Sonia, I think was episode, I used to know these numbers. I think she might have been episode 8 or 9. She was definitely in the first part of Militantly Mixed, and she's going to be participating in this. We're also going to have Teresa Stovall, Auntie, who was on the show a couple weeks before the civil unrest started. And she is the author of Swirl Girl. Let's see, is that all of us? Yeah. And so it's going to be myself, Allison Hart. We're going to kind of be co-hosting and co-moderating the panel. And we'll be joined by Teresa Stovall, Sonia Smith King, and Richard B. Pierre. So head on over to the social media platforms. That's where you're going to find the link. It'll either be in the Facebook group, the Facebook page, the Twitter, or Instagram. And we'll post the links before we get going. And then it'll be available streaming on YouTube as well. And then after the fact, it should stay on YouTube and everything. So I will also include, as a bonus for the Patreon sponsors, I will be including the audio for that. It should be up by Thursday morning, if not Thursday afternoon, for those of y'all that are Patreon sponsors. So yeah, so we got some good things coming up. I'm hoping to get a monthly, or at least every 2 months, panels going through Militantly Mixed. This is going to be the start. It's going to be the tester. I'm learning how to do live streaming, so I might be completely awkward and everything like that, but I hope y'all will bear with me, and hopefully I'll be able to curate some really good panels coming forward after this one. So stay tuned to that. I will put anything that I can in the show notes for you on time, and if it's not there, go to the social media platforms, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Militantly Mixed, or you can join the private Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Militantly Mixed Podcast. And those will be all of the avenues that you can find out that YouTube thing. All right. Is that all of the things? I think that is all of the things. We talked about fundraising, talked about the anniversary show, the hiatus, the panel, the raffle fail. Yeah, I think that's good. So, without further ado, please help me in re-welcoming our latest cousin to the Militantly Mixed family, Dr. Jen Noble, and our continuing conversation from last week, in which we focus on mental health while mixed. So in terms of like your practice, like, do you do mixed race focused therapy with anybody, or is that okay? So how are you finding people? Like, are people coming to you because they're really struggling with their identity? And if so, like, how are they working through that process with you? How does that look?
I think people come to me because they have other things going on in life that they want to get therapy for, but that being mixed is a part of it. And so they would like to be able to address it with someone who understands it versus trying to bring it up to a therapist who's going to be like, well, that doesn't matter, or, just not get it. So a lot of times that gets tied into the other stuff that they might have been going through. So honestly, I really don't think it's ever about being mixed itself. Okay. It's more like, I'm mixed. I know I'm mixed. I know who my parents are, but my peers do this, or my, like maybe people think I look more this than that, or, that kind of stuff. Right. Or it's that my parents, I had this type of interaction or difficulties with my parents, and they happened to both be, then that made an extra complexity to, just regular any parent could have done to their child. But it just added a complication that they also want to be able to talk about at the same time, you know? So if it's like, okay, I don't know, like you mentioned abusive parents. Well, okay, maybe I want to talk about my abusive parent, but my abusive parent also came from this culture. So I think it made either the abuse different, or I perceive this culture is a little bit different, or I have trouble with this and that because of, so it gets tied to larger things. But I have never had a client, or I've never had anybody just walk in and be like, I don't know how to be mixed. It's always, I see. It comes from before that. And then it just gets, tied into something larger. And so when you dissolve or resolve the larger thing, then they're free to kind of be like, all right, like now I can be me because I was dealing with this other bigger thing. So I'm very pro therapy. I've never had a person of color. I've only had white therapists, and I end up spending most of my $90, $100 an hour teaching them how to interact with me. No, thank you.
It's very frustrating. I have the only time I almost had access to a Black therapist, a Black woman therapist, which is if I can't find a mixed therapist, which was my next trying to journey, I was at least trying to find a Black woman. And she didn't want to speak to me because I was polyamorous. And she felt that her Christianity would make it very difficult for her to help me. So like the only time I finally get close.
I said, well, good. At least she said that. So she didn't
at least she said it.
And harm you more. Yeah.
Right. The problem, like the sadness for me was just like, I finally get close to having like how hard it is to find a Black woman therapist where I was at specifically too at the time. And then she didn't want to talk to me, but I end up spending most of my hour educating. And it's so frustrating. So I haven't been to a therapist now, and I because of money reasons, really, in the last like 2 years or a year and a half or so. But the most recent therapist I had, she was, I want to say she's an attempted woke white woman. Like she really tried to do some work, and she would take a session and then later on, investigate a little bit and come back and say like, yes, last time you talked about XYZ and you mentioned, that I don't understand, blah, blah, blah. So I kind of looked into it. She's like, tell me if I'm kind of getting to the right track. And she would kind of tell me what she was reading or, things like that. So it was the first time a white woman therapist had ever like actually tried to say, and at least constantly state, I know that I don't know what you're experiencing. Like, I understand that I don't. And so it was nice to stick with her, at least in that respect, because while she couldn't really help, she at least was just a sounding board who was trying, and I would still like recommend her to people now if I had to, but my goal would still be to find like a Black or a mixed Black therapist now if I could. And
well, now you know someone who knows somebody. So
that's a wonderful. I'm glad. I'm probably definitely as soon as I can get some money, I might hit you up for some recommendations. But for me, like I'm trying to figure out like how are people even supposed to approach, because it's not like we get a discount if we spend 75% of our session educating. How are mixed people even able to approach their monoracial therapist to be able to say like, because the other part is that the monoracial therapist may not even identify that the thing that they're dealing with in that moment that might sound like it's unrelated actually does have a root in their mixed identity.
Well, I mean, if your question is how are they supposed to approach it, honestly, they don't have to. If you feel like this therapist is not getting that, or you can't present this part of you and talk about it in a way that someone is able to convey that they can understand what at least you're saying. They may not have ever been in your shoes, but to at least understand what you're trying to say, then you have all ability to go somewhere else. You know what I mean? That is a waste of your time, like you said, and literally your money to try and spend a whole extra part of your session to just explain the backstory of the one thing that you wanted to say, and then all the time it took to actually explain it, and then you say the thing, and then they still don't fully get it, and then you're like, versus people to just say the thing and have the therapist be like, oh, because 1 and 2 and 3, and you're like, yes, exactly.
Yeah, I've never had that experience. I've had that experience on the show with people, but I've never had that experience in my own therapy sessions. Yeah, I have had a randomly racist against specifically Japanese therapist before that I had to leave because she would constantly remind me that Japanese people are supremacists and horrible people, and that's probably the root of a lot of my problems.
Wow.
It was bold as hell. I was 23, 24, somewhere around there. And we did about 3 sessions before, like it came out and it was kind of like that was interesting. And then it was like the next one, it was like, yo. And by the third one, it was so specific, like in terms of my memory of it, I think that's how it happened. And by the third session, it was like, oh, you are racist. Like I should not be here. And I ended up like writing a letter to the medical group, and I'm pretty sure nothing happened as a result. But it was also like, 15, 17 years ago. Maybe if I wrote that kind of letter now, it might be I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't. But yeah, so I've never, like, I wonder now as a 42-year-old who's been in and out of therapy my whole life, like what therapy was damaging because of how much work I had to put in, and what therapy was damaging because of their biases. You know, like, I don't know. And I really only feel like I've had 2 pretty solid therapists of all the therapists I've had. And one of them was like best intentions. She never addressed, like, if I mentioned race, she would counter with something else, but she was still like trying to help. I could tell she was, and she just didn't get it. Whereas like the last one was like actively doing work. And it was the first time I'd ever seen a white woman like actively do work.
Well, I would say, like, I don't believe, I mean, I think it would be a strong word to say someone is damaging when they can't address it. But I certainly believe it's not helpful and it's not healing. Whether it's fully damaging, you know, could be, could not be. But I definitely feel like it's, if nothing else, it's a waste of time. It slows your progress. It's not helpful. It's not healing. You know what I mean? And then you're just further stuck in the thing that you're actually trying to resolve when that person is not able to help you. I mean, that's like me going to the dentist, and the dentist like, okay, I can, you know,
walk you through how to do your filling.
You know, like, yeah, I'm gonna work around your cavity, and I can sort of look at your cavity partly, and then I'm just not getting the help I need. So why would I keep going back to you when you're like, ooh, cavities? Tell me more. What exactly do you mean by cavity? And tooth? You know what I'm saying? Well, I mean, teeth are really all the same. And you're like, no, you know what? You don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Like, so I to me, for me, cultural competence and cultural humility in a therapist is extremely important. I've definitely had the experience because in grad school, we had to get therapy. I've had one therapist in a postdoc program I was in where I tried to bring up some race stuff that was happening in my postdoc. And she was like, well, we know that's not really what it was, right? And I'm like,
wow.
Yeah, I was like, okay, note to self, like, lucky for you, I'm already in school. Like I thought I could process it here, but I know where I can process it, you know, otherwise. And pretty soon after that, I was like, whatever hours I needed to get, I was done with. And I'm like, I remember she tried to call me later, like, I just want to let you know if you want to, you know, I think she was wanting to start a private practice or something. I'm like, honey, I would never come and see you. Like, you're a nice person. That's it. You're just a nice person. You are not a good therapist. Yeah. For so many reasons, but especially for someone like me. Like, there was so many things I learned that I could not bring up there, which means there were so many things I could not process, and she could not help me process. So what am I paying you for?
What am I paying you for? Yeah. It took me to get into my 40s for me to realize I could stop paying.
Right.
You know, like, until, like, I had to put it in kind of that monetized term for me to realize, like, this is actually not helpful.
Right.
So what am I paying for? So that I can talk about this other thing and just kind of like half address it or partially address it, you know?
Right.
But though I am pro therapy, I've just, like, unfortunately not had the experience until my 40s where someone actually made that kind of an effort. You know, I mean, they tackled the abuse and all that kind of stuff or whatever. Great. Definitely, I'm much healthier now because of those experiences, but race became something that I definitely needed to address, my identity and understanding how to process those moments of, like, not being enough of.
Right.
You know, I think I do as good I can on my own now because I actually am actively addressing it on a regular basis with a lot of people, but, you know, they're not therapists. You know, they're not trained with that kind of competency. That's interesting. Well, okay. Do you mind if I ask, I've been wanting to put together a resource page for mixed race, all kinds of things, like even if it's just books or things. And I'm gathering a few things to put onto the website, but perhaps having a therapist section or a resource section for mental health would be, I mean, it's something I talk about so often. So that might be a great thing. Do you have something like that maybe I can link to your site for, or?
Yeah, for sure. You can link to my site. I was going to say another resource that I'll be putting out soon as well is for parents of mixed teens. And, a lot of times if we look at identity development, especially in my practice, what a lot of the older clients that I'm seeing that, like young adults that not, maybe they're late 20s and early 30s, they're kind of like, I really wish my parents would have done 1, 2, and 3, or my parents never did that and the other. So I'm like, okay, I would like to create a program where I can work with those parents of teens now and be like, here's what you need to start talking about. Here's how you need to approach it. Like you were saying with Sonia says, if your kid comes home and one kid says they're Korean, one kid says they're Black, this is how you handle it. And this is what you say. And this is how you support them. And this way you kind of cut down some of that work so that when they get a little older, they can be like, yeah, okay, I'm cool. My parent was right behind me, coaching me through me finding my identity. So I didn't have to do it by myself and be grasping for straws and be like, am I allowed to listen to hip hop? Should I go to the Bollywood film? Like, what should I do? And am I allowed to, like, you need other people. You shouldn't have to wait until you're much older and then, find like you said, like DM you and be like, can I do this? Like your parents should have been there for you.
Actually, that's something that came up on our group chat last Sunday. So every Sunday at 10 a.m., I have the virtual hangout for folks. And we have about 8 or so regulars. And then we have like randomly 4 to 5 new people will pop up on occasion. But last week, what ended up coming up is how often our parents didn't have our back in sessions that were like formative. And you could see like those of us that were like really messed up still like about it. And it came because one of the women that is a regular in the group, she had mentioned that she's about to bring her family to spend time with their probably kind of on the racist side white relatives. And she wanted to know like how to, in their house, tell them not to talk about certain things in front of her kids, that kind of a thing. And so 2 of us, I was one of them, but another person there, we both said we have vivid memories of being confronted with a racist relative or something like that, where our parents didn't do anything.
Exactly.
And in those moments, we knew we didn't have protection. And even if we were so young, we didn't quite understand what was happening, we knew that physically our bodies were responding to the negativity of what was happening. Like the second we both thought, me and the other woman who were talking, the second we both thought about what it would be like if our parents just put their hand on our shoulder and stood up for us, or like if we were standing up for ourselves, put their hand on our shoulder and told them they had our back, like the just the thought of that happening made us both really emotional. And because we didn't have that experience. And it was I think it was eye-opening for the mixed woman who was there, because she's like, I also didn't have that, but I didn't even like, she's like, I don't even know that I'm okay, that I'm allowed to stand up for myself. Like, so, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that her family never addressed it when she was a kid. And now she's got mixed kids, and they're going to have to address it.
Parents don't know what to say. They don't know how to handle it. They don't really, it finally hits them. They're like, oh, wait, I don't know what it's like to be mixed. I thought I was, I just fell in love with who I fell in love with, or,
solved racism in that moment.
or whatever. Yeah. Like, we liked each other and we got along. And then we didn't really think about, kids, who's going to treat us this way? Who's going to talk about that? So they don't know how to approach it. Because honestly, a lot of times they haven't done the work themselves to even just really think through, what does my relationship mean? How do I see myself as a racial being? Okay, I'm a white woman. I married a Kenyan man. How do I see myself as a white woman? How do I view Kenyans? How do I view Black people?
Right.
How do I view... And then how am I going to translate all that to my kids? Like, that's a lot of thought. They're just like, I just really liked him and we got along and he's so great and he loved me and I loved him. And then we had babies and aren't they so cute? And then the baby's like, I have questions. Yeah. The parents are like, take your questions away. I don't know.
I mean, I'm multi-generationally mixed. I'm second generation mixed, and my parents didn't help. Like, they didn't get it. So because it didn't come up for them. Well, it came up for them, but they didn't have it addressed. So their response when I was asking questions was not addressing it. Like that was the lesson that they had learned. And I'm not planning on having kids. I'm not a kid-friendly space, but like I value that. Like I think that's important work for us to be doing as a community, and so that our future generations of mixed kids actually feel like self-actualized, full human beings, despite the fact that people are telling them that they're partial.
Right, but it just makes that process of becoming self-actualized just a little bit easy, a little bit smoother.
Yeah.
Because you're going to have to do the work no matter what. You're still going to have to grapple with your phenotype and whatever else. But at least if you know your parents tried to talk and help you through as much as they could, okay, good. Then you got some groundwork. But a lot of times mixed race folks are starting from zero. Like, well, how do I do this?
How do I do this?
How do I
at least new books are starting to pop up now. If people are readers and things like that, at least there are starting to be resources for that. But I mean, I was a full adult before the first time I saw the words mixed race written into a book. And it was Naomi Zach was the very first person. And I don't love how she opens it. Like, but it was the first one that I saw, like it was someone who clearly didn't have, who like me had an upbringing where it wasn't really addressed often, and unless I was the one addressing it and things like that. But like even in her opener, I really struggled. There was times when I wanted to put it down because of the intro. And it was like, well, keep pushing through because this woman was in the same boat you were. Nobody talked about this. So where do we start? We start from what we have, and then we kind of build from it. It's, hopefully getting better with time as we have more resources and stuff like that. But I mean,
hopefully.
But like, that's pretty much where I'm at now. Like the beginning year, 6 months to a year of the show was like me trying to figure out what this whole thing was. And now that I feel pretty comfortable in my format and sort of how I'm addressing things, now it's trying to connect the resource points to other people and things. And it's something I do feel behind on in terms of like my website and connecting people. We do finally have on Facebook, we have a private group, and that is starting to take off. It's been in existence the entire time, but it's only now that people are actually starting engaging, and I'm not the only one posting. They're starting to share their own articles. They're starting to figure out who has connections with other people. Like, oh, I was raised Mennonite too. Like we're finally starting to have those types of conversations on that group, which is great. And then we do the social distancing virtual hangouts on Sundays now. And like all of those little things are like starting to create these spaces and these resources. But I definitely want to get further along. And, I want to be able to answer the question if someone calls me up and they're like, I need a mixed therapist. I want to be able to go like, I got you, but I'm not quite there yet. In terms of like right now, mostly what I can say is like, if you want to read a fictional book about a mixed race, multi-generational family, here's a book, like if you want to hear a memoir about this person, here's a book. I know, like, that's kind of where I'm at right now. Or listen to this podcast if you're trying to find another version of what is happening on Militantly Mixed. Like that's so far is my current resource guide for folks.
No, I hear you. Yeah.
But I appreciate the chatting with me extra too, outside of the thing to talk about this stuff, because I think I have very many steps that I'm trying to eventually accomplish in this, professional mixed race life. Being professionally mixed, I think is I created the show because of a gap in my own personal life. So the start of it was I make a joke about it being a selfish endeavor, but it was really because I wanted to talk to mixed people, and I wanted to be able to have conversations that I didn't have to lay out the context, that we could say, oh, I understand what you're going through because blah, blah, blah. Like I wanted to be able to have conversations like that. And everything that I was finding in terms of the podcast world were like white journalists telling America that there were these hybrid people that are in existence, and, they exist, and here's their stories. And they didn't film, like they weren't framed from our perspective. They were framed through a white journalist view. The few mixed race podcasts that existed that were hosted by mixed race people were pretty much dead by the time I started. They might have 6 to 8 or 12 episodes, and then there was nothing else. So it was important to me that when I started, I pushed through whatever that hump was, that 6, 8, 12 episode hump. I needed to push through that. And it took until about the 12th to maybe 15th episode for me to finally settle into my flow. Like I needed all of those conversations to figure out what this was supposed to be. Now that I have it down, now that I'm comfortable with my format, what I want to try to do is add more of that village mentality and that community care side of it. Because what I was feeling like I was in danger of is how many times people email me to ask me permission to be their mixed ass selves. Like I was saying earlier. If a person needs something like that, do I want to turn them away? Absolutely not. But it's so important that I'm not the only podcast voice. And so now I'm telling people, don't just listen to my show, listen to Some Kind of Brown, listen to Mixed with the apostrophe D, like listen to these other things, join these organizations that we've had guests from, that kind of stuff. Like I'm trying to not be the only mixed voice, because that's also defeating the purpose of what we're trying to do, create the footprint of mixed narratives and things like that. Like it's important that we have places for the younger generation to go to, but it's also kind of important for the older generation, because I've got people that are as old as like 68 emailing me, asking me for permission for them to be mixed, because they come from a time where they literally could not talk about it. Now we sort of figuratively struggle with talking about it, but in the 50s and the 40s and they weren't allowed. They definitely weren't allowed. Right. And half of them were illegal. Like, if they weren't military families, they were illegal. So, that's where I'm at now. I'm trying to focus my efforts into maintaining the show as it is, because it's an important resource for what it does. But I want to expand into being able to create these like community care resources. And if not create, link. Link them. Yeah. So I appreciate that. So if you get emails from me from time to time, no problem.
Militantly Mixed is a Main Hustle Media podcast, produced and hosted by me, Charmaine Johnson. Music is by David Bogan, The One. And if you like what you heard on Militantly Mixed, please subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes and wherever you find your podcasts. Main Hustle Media. Turn your side hustle into your main hustle.